Hello, It's Us is dedicated to educating the general public about issues that are important to the disability community, and that we believe that as you view these episodes of Hello, It's Us, you'll recognize that those issues are important to the community at large. Hello, It's Us is brought to you through a collaboration between the University of Iowa Center for Disabilities and Development, Uptown Bill's Coffee Shop, and our good friends here at Public Access Television. My name is Mike Hoenig. I work at the Center for Disabilities and Development, and I serve as one of the co-hosts for Hello, It's Us. Keith?
I'm the other co-host, Keith Ruff. I'm semi-retired and writing a book at the moment. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as Keith said and Julie answered here, we are privileged to have Julie Christensen here for, this is a part two of a two-part interview series with Julie. Julie is the new Associate Director for the University of Iowa, University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities at the University of Iowa Center for Disabilities and Development. So hopefully all of you will remember that big mouthful. Julie, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we were at the end of show one, episode one of this two-part series. We were talking about an employment program called Project Search, which is a comprehensive program to help folks with disabilities, or both young people transitioning out of high school and then adults enter the workforce. And Julie was sharing some of the really good outcomes and the structure of how Project Search works. One of the things that I was interested in finding out about Project Search is whether, in fact, you mentioned a couple of places where it's housed, if the focus is primarily on employment and healthcare settings.
You know, it's a great question, and it's one I get asked a lot. And the answer is no, it is not primarily healthcare settings. At this point, Project Search truly, I think, has hit just about every industry, business industry out there. But I think Project Search is often associated with hospitals and medical centers because it started at University of Cincinnati Children's Hospital. And it's actually a great story that Erin Riley was the emergency room manager, ran the emergency room at Cincinnati Children's. She's a nurse by background. And she had a couple of people with disabilities working in her department. But she was part of the leadership team at Cincinnati Children's and recognized that the largest percentage of revenue coming into the Children's Hospital was providing health care for children with disabilities, but they weren't, as an employer, mirroring the population that they were serving. And that's kind of where this all started. And she said, I'm a nurse, what do I know about, you know, helping people with disabilities get jobs? And so she reached out and partnered with Susie Rakowski, who was at Great Oaks at the time. Susie's a special educator, and they developed this collaborative model. I think it quickly started to become replicated in hospitals for two reasons. One was it started in a hospital, so it kind of made sense. If you're talking about designing a program, it's a little bit of an easier sell. But the other thing is that hospitals, especially teaching hospitals, are a really nice place to do employment skills development because as a teaching hospital, they're used to training everybody, so why not, you know, people with disabilities? And so there's already a culture of, you know, training, and that is really helpful when a model like Project Search is really relying on the people who work for the business to help, you know, to be actively part of training these, you know, people with disabilities, these young folks, to be part of the workforce. So, you know, I think that was a big piece of it, but also for a large part, you know, large hospitals are kind of a little mini microcosm of the community, if you think about it. You know, you have gift shops, you have cafeterias, you have libraries, you have childcare, you have all, you know, you have so much going on within one business that you really can train for just about any job that's out there. So it does make for a nice setting. But that being said, there's project search programs in retail, in manufacturing, you name it, there's programs.
That's really great, and I have to confess that I was of the mind that it was primarily in healthcare settings, and was going to ask the follow-up question, well, gee, what if somebody doesn't want a career in healthcare? And
most people don't, or at least most of the students we had, had no interest in working in the hospital. But when you think about the transferable skills that you're learning, and that's really what Project Search focused on. So unlike some other, job readiness programs that are out there, what Project Search doesn't do is train for any particular job. It's teaching transferable work skills. So, we have had, for example, young folks that have come into our programs that said, I want to work in a veterinary hospital, as an example. Well, why do you want to work in a veterinary hospital? I really like animals. Well, we don't have animals at the hospital. But think about what you need to know to do when you work in a veterinary hospital. So, people are going to come in with a sick animal. They're going to be stressed. How do you work with someone in that environment? How do you sterilize, areas? How do you do that, careful attention to detail in using appropriate cleaners that aren't going to make the animals more sick than when they came in? These are all things that we can train, just as an example, that, you can learn the skills that you need to do the job that you are hoping to get. The environment might look a little bit different.
And probably appropriate conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when I'm sitting here thinking about this is not unlike any career exploration that anyone goes through.
Exactly.
In my own life, I thought maybe at one point I would like to go into the clergy until I started figuring out, we had a little career exploration class in high school, and started realizing I was going to have to learn all this boring theology, and this is not for me. But it's just it's a similar process that maybe people with the disabilities that are served through Project Search maybe really haven't had that education or that exposure which Project Search provides.
It's interesting. We had these conversations all the time about, the level of expectation that students with disabilities, especially going through the school, because of the IEP process, they're asked to commit to what they're going to do at ages that we don't ask anyone else to have to figure that out. So, you think about the average person who is a college graduate is not working in the field that they studied in college. And yet, what is it about people with disabilities that we say that we're going to create a system that's going to help you get a job, but you have to tell us what you want that job to be, and we're only going to train you for that job for a limited period of time, and that's it. We expect you to do that job for the rest of your life. That is not reality. So.
I admit sometimes in my younger days, I felt like I was under a microscope.
Sure. And people probably wanted you to have all the answers. And, it had to be a nice, neat, so the systems work that I love to do, we can sort of understand, you need to have some structure and to guide services and systems, but at the end of the day, you need to allow the flexibility that people are figuring it out. And sometimes it's not going to be the right fit. I started my career in corporate advertising. My undergraduate degree is in graphic design. And I'm doing something very different now. So, we have to allow for, if we're going to talk about inclusion, the way that I like to define inclusion, is that it's not inclusion except for, that, we should be expecting that people with disabilities are going to want the same ongoing, life changes and explorations and switching of directions as, other people do all the time, myself included.
I really hope someday before I leave the earth that we reach a point where we don't need to worry about inclusion anymore.
Well, because if we've done it,
Yeah.
then it's not something we have to be talking about, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
I think it's,
I agree.
I think it's an important point to kind of almost like reframing the issue or systems thinking about, if somebody quote unquote fails at a particular job experience. And just like you said, I guess that's what could have been said of you. But I like the thought much better about this just wasn't the right fit. I didn't like that kind of work, and it wasn't and I think we've all had those experiences in our careers where it just isn't the right fit.
Right.
And if you train somebody on one particular job and it doesn't work for them, then it's almost like going back to square one. So equipping people to be able to go out in the job market and hopefully have those skills transfer to different areas is really a neat concept.
And trying to equip the general public to see to it that it's not a humongous failure because someone wasn't suited for the job like anyone else.
Exactly.
Don't make a big issue of
Right.
it.
I think for far too long, so I always talk about the, unintended consequences of good intentions. and I think, the field, especially the disability employment field, is just full of unintended consequences of good intentions. Where we've done things with the best information that we had at the time with the right intent, but we're always learning, we're always growing, we're always, finding new ways and better ways. But one of those being, in the early stages of supported employment and really the move to help people with disabilities, get out of institutions and into the community and working. It was within particular segments of, of employment. So, we talk about kind of the 4 Fs. I always forget an F, so I should not set myself up for this. So, what is it? Flowers, filth, folding, and filing.
Oh, food didn't make it.
Oh, 5 Fs. Food. Thank you. I forgot. Because I swapped food for folding. Folding is the one I often miss. Laundry services. Yeah. And so when you think about where that comes from, it came from a desire to help people get out and be working, but we created a service system that only allowed for a limited period of time for someone to learn how to do a job. And so we picked the jobs that were fairly easy to do. And that's where people went. And we thought, look at us, we've done such a great job. We're going to pat ourselves on the back because this person's employed. Well, no one ever asked, do I want to work in food services? And, do I want to do that for the rest of my life? And so we got people employed, but in places where their skills were not being utilized. And, it wasn't a good fit. And then heaven forbid, they chose to not stay employed because they were told that's the only thing they could do. And then we say, oh, well, they just weren't motivated or, whatever the case may be. And so we've come so far in that regard. I think the challenge we now face in this field is the ever-evolving, decrease of funding for employment services, and that's from all sides. Vocational rehabilitation funding remains flat, and yet we continue to try to get more and more people employed. Yeah. So, more people requiring services for the same pool of money that we've had for a long time. We have, Medicaid redesign in states all over the country, which I know is a big thing going on in Iowa right now, but it's certainly not unique to just Iowa. And figuring out how to fund these supports, which ironically are not that expensive to begin with, and if done right up front, save the system so much money in the long run. But it's a shift in thinking, it's a shift in priority, and so we have a long way to go in that regard.
I think it's really sad. I know that it's public information that one of our state agencies, it happens to be the state agency for the blind, Volk Rehab in Iowa, has recently had some discussions at the commission, at their governing board level, about whether it's appropriate for the agency to continue to serve people with multiple disabilities. So they would be people who are blind but also have additional, whether it's intellectual disabilities or physical disabilities. And I'm sure that, excuse me, some of that motivation for that discussion is the shrinking resources. It's just an unfortunate thing that now, and I don't know if that's going on in other states, but that those kinds of discussions are even happening. I mean, I do not experience a secondary work-related disability, but if I did, I would not be very comfortable knowing that I might be prioritized at a lower level because I might be considered more difficult to place in a job.
Right.
Well,
Or that you get caught between two systems that are pointing fingers at each other saying, well, he's yours.
Yes.
Which happens all the
Oh,
time.
absolutely.
well, hopefully, with the influx of people with disabilities receiving college education now, the need for supported employment will drift off a little.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, how great would it be if we could all work ourselves out of a job,
Yeah.
right? Because then we've set up a societal infrastructure that's supportive, in ways that it should have been to begin with.
But
There's
you-
always going to be need, though, for
Yeah.
certain supports and accommodations,
Well,
and
Because of intellectual ability.
right.
Well, in case, I think, Keith, it's kind of balanced out that, that you're absolutely right that we have more students with disabilities. We also have more people leaving institutions because of
Yeah.
programs like Money Follows the Person, where, maybe in the
Yes.
past they had a little quote-unquote job at the institution, and now they're out there in the community wanting to be productive, and
Right.
figuring out how to make that happen with shrinking resources is really a challenge for folks.
It's absolutely a challenge, and one of the things that we talked a lot about in New York, and I would guess these conversations are happening in Iowa as well, is that there's a certain amount of trepidation, to use a big word, on the part of providers who went through deinstitutionalization and recognize how poorly we as a disability field handled that, and how many individuals were just left with nothing because we hadn't done the appropriate planning and allowed the appropriate time for transition. And we're seeing that happening again, with the home and community-based services rule from, the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, and we should be doing all of these things. We need to be getting away from segregated services. We
Yeah.
should have done it a long time ago. But we have to be planful and purposeful, because what we don't want is going from segregation to isolation.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's the fear, But we have great laws on the books and great guidance coming down from our federal, federal partners that are saying we need to desegregate, but that doesn't mean that comes with a corresponding influx of dollars to help the service system support people to do that in a way that doesn't end up that people are home isolated with nowhere to go and nothing to do and no one to help them get out, and whatever it is, whether it's to go to work, whether it's to go to the movies, whatever it is somebody wants to do. So we need to plan for that.
It's a very long process, but because of my age, I've seen a lot of progress.
A lot of progress.
But like you said in the first segment, not enough.
We still have a long way to go.
Yes.
I agree, and some of the things that we're fixing now were the fixes that we made then, right? So it's my unintended consequences of good intentions, and so I would like to think that we're in a better place that to make some of these changes happen in a way that are respectful of people's self-directed choice.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that's the piece that we've missed.
And hopefully, like I said Saturday, that this generation comes up doesn't take anything for granted.
So I have to tell you, Keith, Mike knows this, I've been glued to the television for the last 2 weeks because of the Republican
Yes.
convention and the Democrat convention, and I just keep coming back to how so important it is for people with disabilities to get involved and to vote.
Yes.
Because talk about the power in just sheer numbers of going to the polls and demanding for, you know, our legislators to make the resources available that are needed to do this work right.
And talk about getting in a comfort zone when we can't afford to get into a comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, I noticed that, you know, during the convention this week that there was an individual with a disability who talked very personally about the support that she got, that got her to where she is. And I think that that was neat, watching that with somebody who doesn't have a disability, and it's kind of new. I'm sort of bringing her into the whole, you know, the disability community and the advocacy perspective, and you know, I think that spoke to her in a whole different way in terms of it, as if somebody had just gotten up and saying, "Well, disabilities are important," and you know, that they actually, that the person actually talked about what it meant to her, and I think that you're absolutely right. Whether it's voting or whether it's getting on commissions or getting involved in the political process at whatever level a person feels comfortable, so that the true voice of people with disabilities is heard.
Mm-hmm. There was a great moment this week at the Democratic convention that was so subtle that I don't even know that a lot of people who were watching on TV caught it, but one of the speakers that they had is a journalist. I believe he's from Missouri or Nebraska, I can't remember, but he has a rare form of dwarfism. And when he came out, the podium that they were using on the stage just very quietly as he came out lowered. So it adjusted to his height. And it was such a, for me it was, and granted, I'm trained, I suppose, to look for these things because accessibility is such a sticking point for me. But you know, there was no need to make a giant production out of this. It just happened. And what I loved about that is it said to me, whoever planned this event planned it for a diverse audience and the needs of every single person that was coming up on that stage. They didn't need to give him a separate microphone in a separate space. He did everything that anyone else would do, and the podium literally just sunk into the stage to be at the right height level for him to speak. And then when he was done, it rose back up for the next speaker. And I'm so sure that many people didn't even catch it, but to me it was like, that's inclusion. You know, that it was part of the planning. Because I can't even imagine what the mechanical mechanism was that allowed that to happen, but they thought about it and they planned for it and they made it happen. And you know, that's what we should be doing.
That's how far we have come. Because don't forget President Roosevelt had to hide his faces because they were not sure whether the public would accept him on an equal level.
Exactly.
And look what he managed.
What he accomplished.
It's pretty amazing. Well, in our short time remaining, I know this was one of your questions, Keith, and I'm interested too, obviously, to hear you talk, Julie, a little bit about some of your priorities. I mean, I know you haven't been here a long time yet, but just in terms of where, you know, CDD, we are fortunate that we have a long history of serving people with disabilities in Iowa, and you've, you know, acknowledged that, which, you know, is very much appreciated. And so just in your short time, I'm sure you've probably formulated some ideas of things that you would see as either priorities or just even values that you are bringing to the table?
Ooh, that's a hard question. And mostly because I still am and will be for a while, I'm in listen and learn mode. And I think right now that's my most important role. Because there is such a rich history and a team that has been doing such incredible work for such a long period of time that, that is not something that should be disrupted.
We'll have you on in another year.
No, and I say that
No,
sincerely. So a piece of this, I think, is figuring out, this is my approach to collaboration. I know we started to talk about that a little bit in the first hour, but when you're collaborating, and I see the team at CDD in the same way, that we're all collaborators. We all come in with different lenses, different expertise, different areas of our own, personal interest. I've spent the last decade working in employment, so I could very easily say, my goal is, my priority is employment, but that would be unfair because I don't know yet what are the primary needs of people with disabilities in Iowa. That should be leading our direction moving forward. And, so I have some homework to do before I can really articulate that. I think what I'm focusing on right now is trusting this great team that is already operating and doing such phenomenal work, getting to know our external partners and figuring out where there might be, some gaps in whatever it is, whether it's in knowledge, whether it's in connecting some dots. Those are some areas that I might be able to, in the short term, make some contributions just as an outsider looking in. It's always nice to have someone with fresh eyes take a look at things and start to, ask some questions. I'm an inquisitive person, so I think I'm asking a lot of questions right now and figuring out, what maybe some of those priorities might be. And then those are going to have to be, so I'm a qualitative researcher, so, those are going to have to be checked. Do those make sense? Do they, do they fit with, what people with disabilities in Iowa are wanting and needing? Are they in line with the rest of our, DD Act partners, in their strategic plans? And then are they also in line with the CDD team? Everyone at CDD has their own skills and interests, and so, how do we capitalize on that? And that's kind of a long-winded way of saying
excellent.
I'm in the early stages.
Well, and just for our audience's benefit, Julie we've kept her very busy in the past 8 weeks of traveling to Des Moines, and just earlier today, as I mentioned, she observed and participated in our health provider training program, which I thought was really exciting to have her there. And
so cool.
so we're talking about immersion this is like a mini project search for you.
It's been great. No, it's been great.
But Julie, we would like to see you come back in a year and a half.
It's a date.
And go over what you have learned.
I would love that.
Well, we are at time again,
all right.
And we thank you again for spending an hour
fun.
with us. We want to thank our audience, and it has been fun, and we hope you'll tune in again next week.
Thank you out there. Have a good week.